LaunchBox for Android is a great way of getting retro games onto your phone. But even better, you can resurrect that old phone and turn it into a handheld retro gaming system. Let me show you how. Hi and welcome to Bytes and Bits. We all have old phones lying around in our desks just gathering dust and doing nothing, but these do make a really good basis for a retro games console. So I'm using an old Motorola G4 here, not very powerful, but it is really good for setting it up with the 8-bit games and 16-bit games right up to that sort of era. So we can get sort of literally thousands of really good games onto the system and make it a really useful games console. So in this video, I'm going to be using the LaunchBox for Android app and showing you how to set that up, load in the games, customize it, add themes, and put a controller on it. So do please have a look at that, and let's get straight into it. So if you've watched my other video on using an old tablet with the Dig front end to build a retro gaming console, you'll know that that allowed us to go down to Android version 5. Now LaunchBox is a slightly more modern app, so it does require at least version 7. So do make sure that whatever device you're going to use is capable of running Android version 7 or above. I also did find I'm going to use my old Moto G4 phone for this, and that is an octa-core processor, but each individual core, the fastest ones in there are 1.5 gigahertz. Now this phone, as you'll see in the video, did chug along a wee bit through the interface. It wasn't really smooth. There were various pauses, so I would make sure that you get at least that 1.5 gigahertz multiprocessor in your phone. Otherwise it is going to start to really feel a bit sluggish. But having said that, of course, once we get into the actual game itself on the emulators, we will be using RetroArch as the back end, so that will be as normal with anything else. The LaunchBox app isn't actually available through the Google Play Store. You need to download what's known as an APK file from the LaunchBox website. So if you head across to launchbox-app.com and then go across to their Android section and download, you'll need to fill in your email address and they will then send you a download link. Once you click that download link, that will download something called an APK file, which is actually the installation files for the application. And we'll then have a look at how we install that. Now the second bit of code that we need is RetroArch, which is the actual emulator core. Now that is available through the Google Play Store, but since we're going to be doing some side loading of APK files, it actually makes sense to go onto the retroarch.com website, go into their downloads section, and if you scroll down there, you'll see that there are some download links for some Android versions of the system. So we have both a 64-bit and a 32-bit downloads. Now the advantage of going for the APK downloads are that they don't restrict how many emulator cores you have access to. This will give you the full set of instantly updatable online cores for RetroArch. So I would advise that you download both the 64-bit version and 32-bit version. So hopefully we're going to get the 64-bit version working, because that is obviously the more optimized version, but some older phones will only be able to use the 32-bit version. So I would advise you download both now, and then we'll see which one we can get up and running. So once you've downloaded those, we need to get those onto your phone. So really what I'm doing on mine is I am using a little micro SD card, and on that SD card I'm creating a little folder called emulation, and I'm going to be plugging this into my phone once I've got everything assembled. Of course, if you plug your phone into your PC, you can do all of this directly onto its internal storage, but I just find it's easier doing it through a micro SD card, so I can just get everything all ready on my PC and off we go. So I'm creating a folder called emulation just on that SD card, and inside that I've got my LaunchBox APK, my two RetroArch APKs, Now I have actually got a license for my Android version of LaunchBox, so if you have got that, you just simply need to put your license XML file in along with this, and we'll then be able to use that. On top of this, of course, then, we are going to need some of the retro game software to actually run on our system. So I've downloaded some BIOS files and then some games files for a few systems for us to try out here. Again, you'll need to work out how to get hold of these yourself. Do please have a look at my previous video where I set up a tablet using Dig, and also then have a look at the project page that goes along with this tutorial, and you'll find links to all of these in the description down below. And again, I can give you better ideas on how to get hold of this information, how to get hold of these files on there. But in essence, we need to have some games files. We then need our APK files, and we're now ready to go and install this on our phone. So I've plugged the SD card now into my phone, and we need to just find those files to install them. So for that, we're going to need some sort of file manager. Now if your phone doesn't have one as standard on it, you can just download one from the App Store, but that will allow us to go and look on our drives and on the phone. So we can see here we've got the SD card. Inside that we have that emulation folder that I created, and inside there we have our APK files. So to install an APK file, you simply have to click on it. And once that has a look at the application file, it should come up with a little error saying here that we are not allowed to install apps from unknown sources. And of course we can override that, so we need to go into our settings, and inside there you will find that there is an unknown sources toggle. So if we toggle that to on, again it will warn us here that this will now allow us to install random software on our phone. So do be aware that APK files, do make sure you get them from reputable sources, as they can sometimes be faked and have some nasty software on there. But obviously the ones we're using are directly from the LaunchBox website and the RetroArch website. So if we click onto that, then come back out to here, we can now go and try and reinstall that APK file. So it now gives us the option to install that. We click on that, and that will now install the LaunchBox just like any other app. Once that's installed, we can just click Done, because obviously we have to go now and install RetroArch. So again, I've downloaded both the 64-bit and the 32-bit versions here. I know on this phone the 64-bit will just come back and say that it's not compatible. So I'm going to install my RetroArch 32-bit, and that should then be us ready to start some emulation. So once that's completed, we should now find, if I come out of there, we just need to go back to my home page. I need to go into my app folder, and we should find that we have both LaunchBox in there and our RetroArch. So we now need to get these set up so that we can actually play some games. The first app we need to set up then is RetroArch. So when you first start up RetroArch, it will need some permissions to access your SD cards and so on. So just give it allowed access to all of those bits and pieces. It will then start up the application and start to install itself and just finish off that side of things. So just let it run through the base APK installation, and you should then get into the main application itself. So what we need to do in here, we need to start updating it. So we need to go to the online updater, and down the bottom then there are some of the sort of core files that it needs to have updated. So I tend to run through pretty much all of these updates just to make sure that everything is updated directly from their website. So simply run through those in turn. So once we've updated all of those, we now need to go and install some emulation cores. So each of these cores then will emulate one particular retro system for us. So if we go to, on the online updater again, if we go to our core downloader, You can see here we've got a whole list of different systems that we can install. So it's really a matter of working through now which of these systems you have games for and installing a suitable emulation core. Now I have downloaded some arcade games for MAME. And again, MAME is the one which you do really have to have a bit of a think about, in that we need to install the correct version of MAME for the ROM set that we're using. So I've downloaded some ROMs which are MAME 2003 plus, so I'm going to obviously install that core for my RetroArch. And now once we've done that, we can just simply then work through the rest of the systems that we have downloaded games for and install those. So I'm just going to work through those and then come back. So once we've got the relevant cores installed, it's now time to start up our LaunchBox app. So again, LaunchBox needs access to your file system. So again, allow it the various privileges that it's asking for. And once it's done that, it will then complete its setup and drop you into LaunchBox. So first thing to do is we need to import some of the game files. So again, you need to have these game files already on your system so that we can import them. And that's why I got everything ready in one go on that SD card. So if we click onto OK here, so we need to go to our main menu and import games. We can now select a folder where some of our games are. So we just need to navigate out to that. And I'm going to go into games. I'm going to bring in my Atari 7800 games first. So I select that folder. We can see that the system has identified that these are Atari games. We can have a look through these other settings, but mostly we just need to leave those as they are. But down the bottom, we can then proceed with import. So that will start off by going through, on your first run, it will probably download the database of games from the LaunchBox website. And then it will then scan your folder and bring you up a list of games that it's found. So really just, this is just to let you know what it's found. And we just hit the proceed button, and that will now import them into LaunchBox. So once that process is complete, we just click on OK. And this will refresh the interface, and we should now find that we have a section now for consoles. And if we go in there, we should find that we have our Atari 7800. We can go in, we can then see that we get this sort of game genre section. We can skip that in a second, but we can go through to all games, and we should now find that we have our list of Atari games sitting in here. And after a couple of seconds, LaunchBox will automatically grab hold of various logos and box art to make your LaunchBox look that little bit better. Now before we can play any games, we do need to do a little bit of setup for each of the systems. So I've now imported the games, and LaunchBox is aware of where my game files are. But we need to go up to the menu button here, and we need to go down to our emulator settings. So inside here, we need to set up and tell it which emulator we're using. So by default, it expects you to have downloaded an emulator from the Google Play Store. But of course, we haven't done that. So we need to come in here and we need to select the emulator that we downloaded. So again, if you've installed the 64-bit version, you'll have the 64-bit version showing, but I'm of course using my 32-bit version. We'll then have to select the core that we want to use for that. So again, there's only one core for the Atari 7800, and that's one that I have installed. So I have to select that one. And the rest of that we can just leave as it is. So we now go back to our Atari games. We can find a game on our list over here and select that. That will then give us a screen with a bit more information about that game. And we then just simply click on its icon to play it. Okay, so we can go and play that game. And that will drop us into our emulator core. And there we have the Atari 7800 Asteroids. And again, you can see that we have these on-screen overlays. And that's what you use then at the moment to play your game. So you've got all of your buttons available on there. Now if you do want to exit out of the game, you simply need to press the little RetroArch icon down in the bottom right-hand corner. That will take you back to the menu system. So you need to close your content and then go down and quit out of RetroArch, and that will drop you back into LaunchBox, and you're then ready to go off and play something else. So really the next steps then are to repeat this importing process for each of the game systems that you want to emulate. So we're going to go through and import those folders, import those games. But with the standard version of LaunchBox, there is actually a 100 game limit. So eventually you'll come up with a message box like this, which is telling you that you have reached that 100 game limit. And at this point, you do need to go and purchase a license for the Android version. So if you have purchased a license for that, again, you'll see that when we first created that SD card, I did copy my license file onto my SD card. So all I have to do now is to go off and tell it where I've put that license file, and that will then remove my 100 game limit. So that's LaunchBox pretty much set up and ready to play games. But I do find that the default navigation is a bit clunky, and especially when you're on lower powered older phones like I'm using, the number of clicks can start to become a bit cumbersome. So we have, by default then, we have this platform category section at the top, which gives us our sort of consoles, handhelds. If we want to actually get to any platforms themselves, we have to click into one of those. We can then click into a platform itself. We get this game genre section coming up, and generally I will just go into the all games section, and that will eventually then pick up on the actual games themselves. I can then select a game. When I want to play that, I can click on the button here and we get this menu coming up, and I then have to click play to get to that. So that is an awful lot of screen changes and clicks to get into actually playing a game. Now, of course, all of this becomes very personal as to what you prefer, and of course if you're using a much more powerful phone than I'm using, then these clicks will go through that much quicker. But I do like to just simply minimize these numbers of clicks down to getting so I can get to my games as quickly as possible. So let me show you how we can streamline that process. So in our main menu, on the options, there's a navigation section down here, and we can start to look at how we can get rid of some of those clicks. So the first one then is our platform categories page. I don't really see the need for that. I'm not going to have so many platforms that I have to scroll for endless ages to get past them all. So I'm going to turn off that platform categories, and that will then, as my default route filter, take me into the actual game systems. My secondary filter then, so at the moment that's set to genres, but I really don't want to do that. If I click on a platform, I really want to just get down to the games. So I'm going to set that to none. Scrolling down here then, we can see that we can have other options turned on and off. So again, we can go through and we can favorite games. So instead of having to sort of scroll down through our big list, we can actually mark some games as favorites and then have those at the top of the list. And of course that is in by default. That last menu, so when we click on a game and we want to play it, I don't want that coming up. So I can actually just turn that off. Now that does mean that menu is the menu where we can actually favourite games and view information and so on. So what it does then leave is, if I do want to bring up the menu, I can just hold my finger on the game itself and that menu will pop up. So that should then make this thing a lot more streamlined. So let's go back to our main section. So we now have our initial page being a list of all of the different platforms that we have set up on our system. I can then simply click into one. That will then take me to my list of games. When I select my game, if I click on it, that should then take us straight out and start playing the game. So we've got a much nicer, slick menu system, and we can get to our games then much faster. Another of the great features of LaunchBox is that we can customize the look of each of these sort of menu pages. So in the three-dot menu up in the top right, you'll find there's usually a change view function, and that will let you change the way in which this particular menu page is displayed. So at the moment this one is on banners, and I quite like that. But if I go into one of my systems, by default, it has this thing called a wheel where we can sort of scroll through our different games, and then some details on the side here. Now, if you have a lot of games in that particular system, then that can be a bit awkward getting through them all. So I like to go and change my view into grid view. So we actually have a grid then, as you can see here, as it pops up, a grid of the actual box art, and we can scroll through that. Now, of course, this is quite big. It's only showing a couple per page. So we can then, as well, we can refine each of these views by going to the view settings. And I could take the box width down here. So let's take it down to about 100. By about 100. And if I go back then to that, we should see that we get a more games showing per screen. And again, I've only got 4 loaded in here just for this demo, but you can see how that would work out. Now with this one, obviously if we click on a game, it will jump straight into the game itself. So it'd be quite nice if we could further customize that so that when we click into a game, it will actually show some details. And we can do that by using things called themes. So if you go to the launchbox-app.com website and then off to the forums section, you'll come to the community forums. And if we scroll down a bit, we'll get to the user created content and downloads. And inside there, you'll find some LaunchBox for Android custom themes. And if we scroll down the page, you'll see the various themes listed out here. Now, Android themes work differently. If you're familiar with the LaunchBox desktop version, you'll know that when you install a theme, it changes the whole look and feel of all the pages in that system. Android themes, once we install them, and if I have a look at this grid one here, they simply provide you with options to customize the look of individual views. So things like our systems view or our games view. So this one I'm going to have a look at here called the grid. If we click to actually view that theme, you'll see that what that's providing us with is just a single modification for the box grid games view. So that's the one that I ended up selecting where I had a grid of game boxes. So this theme will provide us with an extra option for that view, which will give us this particular one. So we'll have the boxes on one side, but it will also then add this extra bit. So when we select a game, it will bring us up information about that game, and then we will have a click to actually go and play that game. Now, to actually download the file, you do need to register for the forum, so you won't get this button until you do that. But once we do have that download button, we do need to put this in a specific place. So we will need to attach it to our phone. So I've actually taken the SD card back out of my phone. That makes it very easy for me to move things around. Or of course you could download it directly onto your phone. But if I click download here, I have my SD card in here. So if I go to the root of my SD card, you should find that you have a LaunchBox folder, and this was created when we installed LaunchBox, the LaunchBox app. So if I go inside there, you'll find there is a themes folder, and this is where we need to end up putting our theme. So theme's going to come down as a zip file. So I'm going to save the zip file into that folder. And once that's downloaded, I'm then going to open up my File Explorer. And I'm going to go back into my LaunchBox folder, my themes. I have the grid there, so I'm going to open up that archive file. And I'll find there is the theme folder in there. And I need to extract that folder and put it in that themes folder. So I should then, in my LaunchBox themes folder, I should have a folder called the grid, and inside there are the actual theme files itself. Okay, so again then I don't need to have that zip file anymore, and we're now ready to install the theme. So let me just pop that SD card back into my phone and we'll get that set up. So back in LaunchBox, if I now go to one of my system game views and go up to my change view again, we should find that we have a new option in here. So there we have the grid, boxes grid. So let me just apply that. And there we have our new view. So again, we've got our nice box art to one side and our game information on the other. So really all we do here is we simply click on a game to get the new information. When we want to play the game, we just simply do another click on that game, and that will launch RetroArch for us. The very last bit of customization that I'd like to go through is to get rid of the on-screen overlays for the key presses. So again, I'm not a big fan of those. I like to have some physical keys that I can use. So for that, you're going to need a Bluetooth game controller, either one of the ones that clips around your phone or a standalone one, but that needs to be connected up and synced with your system. And the setup for that really is going to be inside RetroArch. So I'm in the RetroArch application here. So if I go to the settings for that, I can come down and I can come to my input. If I scroll down here, I will get to my controller 1 inputs. So I go to controller 1. And really, it's worthwhile going through the set all controls feature, and this will just simply make sure that it's correctly mapped to your particular controller. So if we click on that, we'll see then that it comes through and we start pressing our buttons on our game controller. So once that's all set up, I can then save this controller profile, and that should then recognize my iPega controller next time I plug it in. So next we need to come back out of that one. On the same settings, input settings, we need to now change some of our hotkeys. So we're going to remove the overlay eventually. And if we remove the overlay, we remove the ability to click on the RetroArch menu. So we need some way of getting back into that. So if I scroll down a little bit here, we will see that two things we need to look at are the menu toggle controller combo and the quick controller combo. So really what's going to happen is we're going to set up a button sequence on our controller that will either bring us back into the menu or that will quit the game and take us back out to LaunchBox. So let's set up our menu toggle first. And again, you'll see there's a range of button combinations that are you can provide here, and the ones that I tend to use are, for my menu I will use my L2 and R2, which are the two trigger buttons, and then for my quick controller combo I'm going to use the L3 and R3, which are pressing down on the analog buttons. So that's now our controller set up to work. So if we go back out to our settings and we come down here, we should find there's a section on our on-screen display. So if I go to on-screen display and the on-screen overlay, what I want to do over here then is have it set to hide overlay when controller is connected. So if I don't have a controller, it will bring up the overlay. If I do have a controller connected, it will hide them. And that is pretty much that all set up. So to make sure I save all these settings, I'm going to go back to my main and I'm going to go down to Quit RetroArch, and that should hopefully then save all of my settings. So once I've got my controller now plugged in, even in LaunchBox I can use that to do all of the navigation. So I can just use my D-pad to get across to my system. I can then select my Super Nintendo game console. When that brings me into my game display, again I can use my D-pad to go through and have a look at the various games that I've got. Once I've found the one I want, again I just press my A button and that will then launch RetroArch and bring up the game. Once the game starts, as soon as I press a button, RetroArch will recognize I've got a controller and take off my overlay. If I do need to get into the RetroArch menu, I can just hold in my two trigger buttons and that takes me back to my menu. If I want to get back out of the menu, hold my two trigger buttons back in again. And then to quit my game, I just press my two analog sticks in, and that will take me back to my LaunchBox games screen. So that's pretty much our old phone retro game system all set up and ready to go, all nicely customized and looking really good actually. I must admit, I really do like the look of this LaunchBox app. So again, if you've enjoyed that, do please click that like button and do consider subscribing to the channel. We'll be doing lots more videos like this, so do hit that notification bell as well to be notified when those are released. I look forward to seeing you again very soon, and bye for now. For more games programming, electronics projects and retro gaming, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit my website.